Here we go.
There you
There
go.
he is, Mike.
What's up, fellas?
How's it
How are you,
going?
Mike?
What's up, Mike? How are you?
How you guys doing?
You know, we've never really, Mike's never seen us. Imagine he just looks at his wife and goes, that guy was cursing behind me at a Knick game 10 years ago. I've been calling these morons.
I'm taking a look around. I'm out of here, guys. See you later.
Hey,
Mike,
Mike, before we get into sports, let me ask you a personal question. What are we going to do about our hair since we can't get a haircut?
I'm embracing the mullet that I haven't had since 1992. So
I think mullets are going to come back in style, I think.
whether they're going to be style or not, they're going to proliferate. And I've already warned my wife that she's going to be seeing that in about 2 weeks.
So
We cut
listen, before you healthy though, Mike? Everybody's good?
Knock wood. Knock wood.
Yeah,
Everybody's
same
doing
here.
well. Yep.
So listen, before we get into some of the sports, so I don't know if the other two guys know this, but I connected with Mike the first time. I worked with a bunch of guys he went to high school with, which was similar to an all-boys school that I went to on Staten Island. He went to Chaminade. And Joe and Tony, that's where Brian Dennehy went. So Mike had some nice tweets about the loss of that legend. And we're all big movie guys like you, Mike. So I sat down the night that he passed, which I guess was Thursday. And Mike, I have 3 kids, girl, boy, girl. My son is 19. They're obviously all home from school. Two of them are away at school. They're home now, obviously, and one is in high school. I looked at my son. I said, I'm going to give you a doozy. Let's sit down. We watched First Blood. If you think that thing didn't hold up 37 years,
Oh yeah.
it holds up.
And
It's
you know,
excellent.
I mean, Stallone is great in it, but our boy is really good as the badass sheriff.
And Richard Crenna,
Richard Crenna is terrific also.
tremendous in it.
I actually, my Dennehy tribute was rewatching Silverado on Friday. It was where he played a badass sheriff again, actually. But he was the last thing. He was the last thing of you think about as a typecast guy, but he was great in that role too.
I thought one of his best roles. I know that there's the Silverado. A lot of people mention, but he was excellent in Presumed Innocent with Harrison Ford.
Yeah, also a bad guy in that movie, kind of really.
Also a bad. Absolutely, he basically.
He played a good villain.
Yes.
Although
So Mike, what are you doing? I mean, what are you thinking of like our love of old sports, and give me some of your thoughts on this thing. I'm watching games every night. You know, David Wright goes 3 for 4 against St. Louis, and give me some of your thoughts.
2013, right? Well, I mean, just so you guys know, I actually wore a collared shirt today for the first time in about a month. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Never know where this is going to show up. Didn't want this to be YouTubed in a rock concert T-shirt from 1986 or anything. You know, I do love the old games. I kind of mentioned this today though, that watching old games once or twice a week is really a lot of fun, and you almost can't get enough of it. You never want those games to end, but when you're watching 3 and 4 a day, it's kind of like having too many hot fudge sundaes. I mean, if you have one every couple of weeks, you want to savor it. But if you're going to eat 7 in a day, it's probably not going to be very good for you. But I mean, look, I mean, what I've taken to doing now is I look at the guide, see how far along it is, and I'll come back later for the ending, because invariably the reason why it's a classic is because it got a great ending. For the most
Correct.
part.
That's true. And you know the way it ends. I will tell you though, look, I totally agree, right? Tony and I have been chatting with each other for weeks on text. What are you doing? What are you watching? What are you reading? I agree. The bloom is off the rose a little on some of these games, right? I mean, but then some of them are classics. And I will tell you that I really got a kick out of the MLB playing some of those games from the 60s, just to sit there and watch them at the pace of the play and the change of baseball. It's crazy, but I really picked up on it. Whether it was bunting or they had a great Game 7 on the Tigers Cardinals about 3 weeks ago.
Harry
Gibson Lolich. What a great game.
Well, and also, these are things from games even as far back as the early 80s, which funny is to watch like guys who like foul balls off in the dirt and the catcher just throws the ball back to the pitcher. So you think of the 100 reasons why games last so long. Now, one is that, if a ball touches a granule of dirt, it gets thrown out of play and the umpire throws it back in and pitcher rubs it up, and it's 10 seconds here and 17 seconds there and 12 seconds there. But
turns into 345 versus 220.
I mean, it's funny. In the old days, the pitchers actually liked it when the balls got dirty because they thought they were harder to hit. But now these princes like to have pristine baseballs that they throw. So it is.
Hey, Mike,
Gotcha.
staying with the theme in terms of old sports, I'm actually looking forward to the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance, which is going to be on ESPN tonight, 10-part series, I guess, on that last season and last championship for the Bulls. You obviously interacted with the Bulls when they came into play the Knicks. Give me your thoughts on that Bull team in terms of what pops out of your mind.
Well, I love the fact that Jordan had the rights to all this video for years and years, and it kind of was just kind of wasting away in a vault in Sea Caucus. And the day he decided to do it was the day he saw the Cavaliers beat the Warriors, and it was like he almost had a realization. You know what? People think the Warriors invented basketball, and they think LeBron invented basketball. So maybe I might want to let people have an idea of what things used to be like. And I think, look, I mean, if you're guys like us and you remember those days, you know how good he was. I mean, if you were a Knicks fan, you really know, because he used to just kill you every year after year, take your heart out and stomp on it. But I mean, there's a whole couple of generations of basketball fans who only know about Michael Jordan from history books and highlight films, and it's going to be a great thing for these kids to see what he was like, what that team was like in their very prime. And in a lot of ways, as great as the Bulls were the first 3 times they won it, which is when they really kind of stomped on the Knicks, because the Knicks had a better team in '93, and they just couldn't get over the hump against them. But those '96, '97, '98 Bulls were just spectacular to watch, because I mean, they were. If Jordan wasn't at the peak of his athletic prime, he was at the peak of his ability as a basketball player, where he still had incredible skill, but he also had 12 years of experience that he would apply every night. And he played every game. I mean, the whole idea of load management. I mean, he would have punched you in the face if you would have suggested that to him. And most of his teammates were like that. Pippen. And I think the guy that would really do well. I mean, it's so funny how quickly people forget how great Pippen was, and how important he was toward everything they did. Because I mean, yes, Jordan was the best player of that time, maybe of all time, but he had a pretty extraordinary wingman, and in Pippen, who was just, an all-NBA player himself, and it gets kind of lost. I can remember having a huge argument with somebody, back when LeBron was teaming with Kyrie, and talking about Kyrie being the greatest, sidekick of all time, and I'm like, back it up a little bit,
No way.
And then you throw in the fact that Dennis Rodman was on that team, so you have 3 Hall of Famers playing every night. So there's no mystery why that team was so good.
Hey, listen, you referenced it in your article this morning. Pippen almost dragged them to the finals without Jordan, and if they didn't have that foul on Hubert Davis, it might have happened.
And people would probably think a lot different about Scottie Pippen's career if they had won that.
Exactly. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. So listen, I'll give you guys a laugh. Whenever I watch a movie with my son, he's like, please, if you've seen it, don't gasp when something's going to happen. If it's The Shining. So he said, he's a huge sports kid, obviously. And he said to me the other day, he goes, they bumped it up to Sunday night, meaning tonight. And he said, am I going to be able to watch this with you? I said, all right, I'll hold my tongue, but it's going to be tough, because I know I'm going to be like, Mike, watch how he makes this move here. So look, that's our, Mike, to say that's our wheelhouse is the understatement of a lifetime. I mean, I went to the game. I went to the Charles Smith game, but one of the best games I ever went to are the atmospheres. And I'm sure you know the atmosphere. I actually went to game 3 that year after the Starks dunk in the old Chicago Stadium.
Oh, wow.
We had a business event. It was Saturday afternoon. I don't know the time of the game. It was probably like 3 or 4 o'clock.
Probably 3:30.
Yep. I went to with a guy here who lives here. Still friendly with him. And we went to the Cub game at 12, left in the 4th inning, shot over to the stadium. And I'd never been there, obviously, one and done for me at the old Chicago Stadium. And when they called it a bandbox, it was, I mean, you felt like if you lit a match, you would have blown the place up in about 2 seconds, right? How tight it was, how tight the staircases were and all that. The national anthem almost blew my eardrums out, right? They were down 2-0. Jordan was as pissed as possible. And I think it was 31-3 by the time we sat in our seats. And we absolutely blew them out. And that was it. The Knicks never won another game, right? Because the Charles Smith game that put the Knicks down 3-2.
I mean, it really, all you need to know about great series, great games is when you could refer to them as the Charles Smith game or the John Starks game.
Yeah, 25 years later.
You know exactly what you're talking about. For Mets fans, you have the Terry Pendleton game and you have the Mike Socia game. It goes on and on.
Absolutely.
That's great. Sports fans are great in being able to talk in their own kind of shorthand that is almost instantly recognizable by people who speak all sporting tongues.
Listen, again, we're all in our low 50s. 2 weeks ago it's so funny that the love of those games, you could pull up any one of those games on your own on YouTube. We know that. But we still get violent texts when they're on regular TV, right? I mean, I must have gotten 5 texts last week with the 16-inning thriller of Game 6 of '86 down in Houston. And it just generates so many conversations, right? And again, that game started at like 3 o'clock, I think. Started watching it on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, listened to it on the radio on the Staten Island Ferry, and then the conductor, there's actually a train line on Staten Island that runs along the down to the South Shore, runs on the top of the island, coming off the ferry. And the conductor actually took the transistor radio and put it on the train. And everybody was listening to the game, and the game still didn't end for 3 hours after that. So it's great. And when, like you said, whether it's Pendleton or the Socia '88 game or the Pendleton '87 game, it's great. It's an identifier, and it makes you realize why you love these games.
We might hear
Mike,
you might hear a retching sound in the background when I tell you this short story, but I've been married. It's gonna be 25 years in August, and I was lucky to even get to the altar because we were going out and I wasn't living in New York yet, so I was still kind of able to retain all my youthful Knicks fandom at the time. And so I was in my apartment watching the '93 Charles Smith game, and we were going out a couple of months, but I don't think she really understood yet exactly what sports was to me. And she just walked in on the apartment. She saw me rocking back and forth, watching the last few minutes of that game. And I think she wanted to have me committed. I'm surprised she agreed to just keep going out with me after that. But I guess, you got to figure it out if you're going to get married to a sports writer.
Listen, it's in your, I know you're right about this movie a lot, but it's all about the test he gives her in Diner, right?
The whole world comes down to that, right? And I'd like to think that my wife would absolutely know who Alan Amici was for sure if she had to.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about baseball. Give me an idea in terms of what kind of season you think we're going to see, if we're going to see a season at all. I know they've been talking about this kind of biosphere type setup in Arizona. What does your gut tell you if you formulate an opinion?
If you're looking at it logically, just sheer logic in a vacuum, it's kind of hard to see how this is ever going to get pulled off because a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that you have to think about. I mean, even stuff that has almost very little to do with the virus itself, such as, even if you have 28-man rosters, I mean, what if 5 people get hurt? There's no minor leagues going on right now. So where the replacement player is going to come from? And further along those points, how are you going to develop stars for next year and the year after that if there's no minor leagues? I mean, we're talking about this biosphere for all the major leaguers, but it doesn't help minor league baseball. So that's one of just a million small little things that I think would probably stand in the way logically. Now, that said, I know that the people who run the sport are not only committed to having a season, but believe they're going to have one. So that at least gives you the idea that somebody with some kind of decision-making powers, is committed to making sure that something goes on this year. The tricky thing about baseball, if basketball or hockey comes back, even if it's just for like a truncated playoff scenario, you can get ready in a week. I mean, the biggest problem for those guys is that there's so many players that live in other countries, and so they're going to have to go through hoops to get visas and to get back and to not and to kind of get away with the quarantines and stuff. But they'll be physically ready to play games in 5, 6, 7 days. In baseball, you can't do that. I mean, an entire segment of the sport in pitching, needs to be brought along, or else you're asking for trouble. So, whether you want a bonus spring training or not, you're going to have one that's, 3 weeks long, and even 3 weeks isn't a lot. But if that happens, it's going to be an entirely different sport because no manager who wants to save his job is going to let a pitcher throw 5 innings, 6 innings, 7 innings if they've only had 3 weeks to stretch themselves out. So there's a lot of things here to consider. But I think one thing that we're all coming to terms with is going to be a long time before we have games that have fans in them. And if sports can completely commit to the notion of having empty stadiums and what kind of a financial cost that's going to have on people. I mean, that's the reason why I think there's legitimately questions about whether baseball can pull this off. That's why, to me, I mean, there's no question that football is going to figure out a way to do it, because even if they don't play in front of any fans, their bread and butter is just. We've always joked about how they're going to play these games in a television studio one day anyway, and so really that's what's going to happen. So I think the NFL, I mean, because just the notion as a nation, I don't think that we're ready for a year without football. That would really be devastating to the national psyche. I mean, it would be awful for baseball. It would be awful if we don't get the other sports back. But that's one that would be really hard to stomach, I think. So they'll do everything.
Yeah,
in their power.
it's clunky. Listen, I'll admit it, guilty. I was one of the first ones in my circle or whatever to say, why don't we just throw them all in Arizona and let them play? But it's like you said, there's a lot of moving parts to this. There's a lot.
It does seem like it's the most. I mean, as crazy as it is, though, I mean, it does make the most sense in terms of being able to pull it off. But look, I mean, to me, the biggest thing of anything, forget about fans wanting to go back to stadiums or any of that stuff. Look, I mean, these leagues exist because of the goodwill they have with fans and the general public. And if we're still in a situation when they're talking about starting these leagues up, where they're talking about one of the things that they would be able to set the go ahead is if there's regular testing. Well, guess what? 1% of the American population has been tested so far. So obviously we don't have access to these tests as we should. If it turns out that baseball players and basketball players have so much access to these tests, they can get tested every week. There's going to be a blowback to that. There just is. And it might not be among the most dire of sports fans, but you know what? We're getting to a point where all of us know somebody, whether directly or indirectly, who has gotten sick, who has died. And, the basic fairness of pro athletes being, I mean, there already was, when people wanted to know how did all those jazz players get access to tests when nobody could. And look, it didn't last forever, but it will last forever. If baseball has a league that's ongoing because they have so many tests that they can administer it to every player once a week, they're going to have to answer to that. And I don't think that any sports league really wants to answer to that.
Mike, we appreciate you joining us.
Guys,
on the fly,
man.
On the fly, Mike. Who says 50-year-olds can't adapt? Come on, Mike. Get it.
I'm looking at these 3 mugshots. There's going to be like a Usual Suspects.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Or a Just for Men commercial in the brewing. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.